thought since the 80s are about to come to a close, it would be fun to recap the decade. Today we have 25 of the best records from the 1980s, and I hope you like modern rock because today's list is heavy on the alternative. Hey, what's up? I'm Jason, and this video is for vinyl lovers who want something new to listen to, purchase, or avoid. I focus on vinyl, but everyone is welcome. Let's jump right in. I'm sorry that today I can only show these records on vinyl. I'm trying to get a ride to the record store to trade my vinyl in for CDs, but I don't actually know anyone with a car right now. I know, stupid, but we'll get there. Dude, these things are freaking amazing. You don't have to flip them over to Hear Side 2. You can listen to like 5 of these things in a row without lifting a finger, and they sound amazing. They work with lasers or something. These right here, CDs, this is the future. All right, let's kick off this list by going back 10 years to 1980 with a really interesting one called Welcome Plastics by Plastics. Some people say these guys sound like a cross between Devo and the B-52s, which they sort of do, but I also think that there's a lot of influences going on here. This was actually recorded before 1980 because the label has a 1979 date on it. And there's something very charming about this album. It's very new wave. In fact, it might be the most new wave thing you will ever hear. Welcome Plastics was ranked number 19 in the Japanese edition Rolling Stone's list of the 100 greatest Japanese rock albums of all time. So I think it's definitely worth checking out for yourself. It's very fun. We even got the little Mario. Of course, I was not gonna remove that. All right, next up, a masterpiece from one of the greatest bands of this decade, the Talking Heads. This one's called Remain in Light. It was released in October of 1980 and was produced by the great Brian Eno. Incidentally, it was the last of their albums produced by Eno, and for many people, this is their favorite 80s album, and it is hard to argue with them. This isn't my favorite 80s album, but it's right up there, and the album is just packed with fantastic music. The Talking Heads are always in the groove, making their music danceable and head-boppable. This is such a great album. This is the Human League's Dare, released in October of 1981 in the UK. We didn't actually get this in the US until mid-1982, but this album is just packed with awesome synthesizer-infused new wave music. The biggest hit on here is Don't You Want Me, but there's so much cool stuff on here. I love the sound of the crowd and Darkness. Dare has appeared on several greatest albums lists, usually weighing in at about between 40-something and 70-something. If you like new wave and you haven't heard this, you are in for a treat. Also released in October 1981 was Ghosts in the Machine by The Police. This album contains the hits Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic, Invisible Sun, and Spirits in the Material World. The Police are an MTV staple, and when this album came out, you couldn't go 10 minutes without seeing one of their music videos or hearing one of their songs on the radio, and with great reason. This is probably my favorite all-around Police album. It's just very solid from cover to cover. This is a fantastic album from The Sound. It's called From the Lion's Mouth, and it came out in November of 1981. It's more on the gothic end of modern rock, so if you like The Cure, Susie and the Banshees, Joy Division, or New Order, or even the Psychedelic Furs, this could be right up your alley. This is very much a hidden gem. It's got all the hallmarks of that kind of sound, great synths, ringing guitars, brooding vocals. It's just a very, very cool record. If you've never heard it, maybe start with the tunes Contact, The Fact, and Skeletons, and crank up the volume. All right, from April of 1982, another debut album, and this is the self-titled album from A Flock of Seagulls. I know what you're thinking, I ran so far away, okay, whatever. Don't forget Space Age Love Song. This is really a very good album. If anything, I Ran might have actually hurt the band, just in the sense that it's all the average person remembers about them, but also this album reached number 10 on the US Billboard 200, so what do I know? Okay, the very next month in May of 1982 saw another album that you might think just contains a one-hit wonder, but again, this is a really good album. We all know about She Blinded Me with Science, which is a great tune, but even better in my mind is a song called Europa and the Pirate Twins. It's a very mature tune that's fun to sing and dance to, extremely catchy. Radio Silence is another great one. I just love this album. May also saw Duran Duran's incredible album Rio. In the early 80s, there were a handful of bands whose symbiotic relationship with MTV really carried both band and network to pretty incredible heights, and Duran Duran was one of those bands. Rio received so much promotion through MTV that they became a household name by the end of 1982. I think the tunes Rio, Hungry Like the Wolf, and Save a Prayer will become 80s anthems, but we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, again, May 1982, and this time it's Roxy Music's Avalon. What a cool album. I really love the title track, but the first single from the album was More Than This, which is also a beautiful tune. Hardcore Roxy fans might think of this album as a sellout album despite and maybe because it is the band's most successful record, but while I don't love every tune on here, the best songs on this album are so good. This was their last studio album. Will we see more from Roxy Music? I hope so. March of Metal Health by Quiet Riot. And while I'm not large contingency of rockers that scoff at this album contained two songs that became mainstream anthems, Metal Health, Bang Your Head, and Come On Feel the Noise. But regardless of which side of the fence you're on, there are some catchy tunes and fantastic playing on this album. Quiet Riot opened for Black Sabbath in support of this album. During that tour, bassist Rudy Sarzo was famously punched in the face by Ozzy for leaving Ozzy's band to rejoin Quiet Riot several months prior. This one took me a while to snag, and this record is gnarly. So far, this is the most successful album from Dio, called Holy Diver. James Dio had just finished his stretch with Black Sabbath when he put this together, and this is their debut offering. What a great album. In my opinion, this is a heavy metal must-have. Rainbow in the Dark is maybe the most well-known tune on this record. Check out this killer cover. Those colors are just awesome. This is the album to listen to while playing a sweaty all-night session of Dungeons & Dragons. All right, I think this is the first compilation on this list. This is Rock and Soul Part 1 by Hall & Oates from October of 1983. This album doesn't have a bad song on it, which is impressive even for a greatest hits record. Two of the songs on here are original to this record, Say It Isn't So and Adult Education. Also on this album are Kiss on My List, You Make My Dreams, Private Eyes, I Can't Go For That, Man Eater, One on One. Need I say more? Nope. Next! Rebel Yell by Billy Idol. Released in November of 1983, I think Billy Idol's music is a little bit underrated. This record has Rebel Yell, the beautiful Eyes Without a Face, Flesh for Fantasy, and Catch My Fall. All terrific songs, but even the non-single tunes on here are better than most. Idol got the idea of the album's title after attending a party with the Rolling Stones and drinking a bourbon whiskey called Rebel Yell. Idol's records are just so much fun with fantastic musicianship, thanks in part to lifelong guitarist and collaborator Steve Stevens. I know we're only about halfway through this list, but I have to ask you, have you checked out Mion Records yet? Well, as soon as you're done watching this video, go to mion.tokyo and use promo code SPINS to save 10% on your next vinyl records purchase. Mion has a massive inventory of your favorite records, their grading is the best in the business, and their packaging and shipping ensure that you receive your records swiftly and damage-free. This is the self-titled Madness. Another compilation. A few years ago, probably around 1987, I really started to get into ska music, and Madness is probably one of the more commercially successful ska bands, right up there with the English Beat. It's possible that what makes these bands so successful is that they incorporate different styles into their music and have managed to create a string of pop hits. Madness is responsible for the tunes One Step Beyond, It Must Be Love, and Our House. Another favorite of mine is Primrose Hill. This is just a really great, upbeat album. I love it. This is Ratt's debut studio album from February 1984 called Out of the Cellar. Another one that received a lot of airplay on MTV when it came out. Round and Round was the first single and probably the best known track on this album, but this is really a nice hard rockin' album all around. Out of the cellar and into the fire. Out of the cellar and into your hearts. Delete that. This right here has quickly earned a place in my heart as one of my favorite albums from this decade. This is Killing Joke's Nighttime, released in February of 1985. This has a song on it that I cannot stop listening to called Love Like Blood. It's just a perfect song. This record also has the song 80's, which was the first single off the album. If you don't know about Killing Joke, you have to give them a shot. They're fantastic.
Music stirs you up. At Bold 3 Detergent Plus Fabric Softener. Music takes hold of you, and when it's good, it doesn't let go of you. Call toll-free. Just find our ad. It's in your Sunday paper. Pick any 11 records or tapes for a penny and see how to get even more music free.
Here's another masterpiece, also from February of 1985. This is Songs from the Big Chair by Tears for Fears. This album contains two of my favorite 80s songs, Head Over Heels and Everybody Wants to Rule the World. It also includes the hits Shout and Mother's Talk. What a fantastic album. It reached number 2 on the UK albums chart and spawned 5 successful singles. Everybody Wants to Rule the World was really their breakthrough hit in the US and has become an 80s anthem to this day in December of 1989. All right, I would never have heard of this album if it wasn't for Ferris Bueller's Day Off. This, of course, is the Dream Academy debut self-titled album from November of 1985. This album was co-produced by Pink Floyd guitarist David Gilmour. Life in a Northern Town is probably the Dream Academy's one major successfully charting song, but The Edge of Forever, which appears in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, is another beautiful tune that I just cannot get enough of. From November of 1985, this is Big Audio Dynamite. I've been wearing this record out. Big Audio Dynamite, led by Mick Jones, the former lead guitarist and co-lead vocalist of The Clash, are a blend of alternative, punk, dance, and have put out some fantastic music. My favorite tunes on this album are Medicine Show and E=MC². They're just fun, danceable, singable tunes that are impossible to listen to without bobbing your head. The Bottom Line is another great one. Sony is another great one. This is my favorite album of theirs, and if you haven't heard it, go check it out. All right, this album. This is another self-titled debut album, this time from Book of Love, and was released in April of 1986. Something cool about this decade was the use of bells and chimes in some bands, like Altered Images, and they're used to great effect on the song Boy on this album. Other highlights for me are the tunes Modigliani and I Touch Roses. This is just one of my favorite albums from this decade, and I suspect I'll still love this record well into the next century. One of my favorite bands right now is Dead or Alive, and this is a killer album called Rip It Up. This is a compilation album of remixes, Brand New Lover, Something in My House, You Spin Me Round. Every song is singable and danceable. It's just so much fun, and Pete Burns has such a fantastic voice. This is great electronic dance pop music. It's also mixed so that each track runs into the next one so you can have a non-stop dance party. The great Chance of Concert Buddy fame kindly gifted this album to me because I didn't have a copy, and it's one of my favorite records of all time. Of course, I'm talking about Faith by George Michael, previously of Wham. This is his debut solo album, and what an offering, man. I think I would have to put George Michael on my top 10 list of singers. It's impossible for me to listen to Father Figure or One More Try without shedding at least one tear, and usually many more. What a gift it is to write songs that have such an emotional impact on people. This album is ranked 151 on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums list. It is a masterpiece. All right, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about this fantastic 80s blues album. This is Late Night City Blues by the Chris Kane Band. Chris Kane was born in San Jose, California, and is a jewel of Bay Area blues. My dad used to watch him perform, and I remember the day he came home with this album. Kane is a phenomenal guitar player, and I mean phenomenal guitar player and songwriter. This album has nothing but great instrumentation on it, and it's very much a part of its time lyrically. So far, this album has not received a reissue as far as I know, so if you can find a copy, snag it. You will not regret it. Another awesome remix album. This is the best of the Thompson Twins. The Thompson Twins are very 80s in that you almost can't have one without the other, and this album is just super cool. I'm sure you know the songs Lies, Lay Your Hands on Me, Hold Me Now, Doctor Doctor, King for a Day, and this is a really fun way to listen to these great tunes. Again, a very singable, danceable album. This album literally just came out and I already love it. This is Plastic Fantastic by Flesh for Lulu, released in 1989. Perhaps their most famous tune is I Go Crazy from the 1987 film Some Kind of Wonderful, a very underrated film. On this record, we get Every Little Word, just a beautiful, cool 80s song and one of my favorites. But this whole album is really worth the price of admission. All right, I tried to keep this video short and sweet. I don't know how you're ever gonna see it. Maybe I'll dub copies of it and then you guys can rent it from Blockbuster Video or Hollywood Video or something.
I've never seen 10,000 tapes in one store.
There's so much kid stuff.
And I can keep them for 3 evenings.
Anyway, if you ever do see it, I hope you enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Maybe, if they ever come out with a technology that makes it easier to share videos.